Hey, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of Disgusted. I've decided to bestow upon you the knowledge that's been spread around the collecting community and give you a few tips of my own. I know there's lots of people out there, especially non-collectors, that wonder how gamers like me, the Game Chasers, Metal Jesus Rocks, Beat 'em Ups, and so on can amass such a large collection without breaking the bank. The first thought is, maybe they're rich. Oh boy, do I wish. YouTube doesn't pay enough to live comfortably and buy all these games. Also, most of the YouTubers out there have another job in the real world just to help pay the bills. Maybe their fans send them stuff. That can happen, but fans don't coordinate with each other in a way to guarantee that the YouTuber won't receive a game they don't already own. Game Grumps had this issue and threw a bunch of doubles on eBay, with the proceeds going towards charity. And I believe the Game Chasers sell or trade their doubles so they can afford the stuff they buy on the show. No, a lot of what goes into a large collection is luck. Finding the good deals, walking by a copy of Tomba at the flea market for $1, which, yes, that's actually how I got my copy. Knowing the going rate of the big ticket items, and knowing when to shell out the cash for them. There's a lot of the finer details that go into collecting, and I'm going to help you get started right here, right now. First of all, why do you want to collect? What's the main reason you want to build your very own throne of games? Is it because you want to show them off to your friends? Have a discussion piece in plain sight for everyone to see when they visit your humble abode? Well, that's not really a good reason to start collecting. Sure, you can show off your collection and talk about your amazing finds with your friends and family that come to see your epic library, but if you're only into it because you want to be cool and hip, you won't really have as much fun. Do you want to collect as investments, playing the stocks of Earthbound and Little Samson, trying to earn that little bit extra so you can retire early? Well, I hate to break it to you, but that's not really a good idea either. Unless you find 7,000 copies of Surprise at Dinosaur Peak for $5 a piece and sell them right away for their going rate, you're not going to be able to achieve that financial explosion you were hoping for. A lot of times when you're selling a game, you're barely looking at much of a profit. You won't find enough good deals to really allow yourself to live off of it unless you open up your own game store so that you can choose your prices that way. When I think of a good reason to start collecting, I believe it's best when it's specifically for your enjoyment. Reasons like nostalgia, variety, or game nights. I personally got into collecting because I know I missed out on a lot of different games. As a child, I only had a Game Boy, and later on I got a PS1, Xbox, PS2, and a 360. It wasn't until halfway through the previous generation that I thought about collecting. When I would get a new console, it was usually a birthday or Christmas gift, and I would trade in my old console for new games. It was just between high school and college where I started to say, I should keep the games I own, even if I beat them. This was in part thanks to my fiancé. We're both adding to our collection fairly frequently. I knew I wanted to get a PS3. Koei Tecmo's games were starting to become more sparse on the 360, and I really wanted to support my favorite gaming company. So when I got enough EB Games gift cards, I went and bought myself a used one, along with Dynasty Warriors 7 Extreme Legends and Trinity Souls of Zil-Ul. When I got this new console, I didn't get rid of my old 360. I knew I'd still want to play some of those games. I will randomly boot up my 360, but I've always been more of a PlayStation gamer. When the DS was popular, I was playing my PSP. Even now, the Vita is my favorite handheld of all time. I also love attempting to get platinum trophies and playing the many PlayStation exclusive titles. But then that doesn't mean I only like PlayStation. After a while, my fiancé and I were able to pick up every Nintendo console with the exception of the Virtual Boy, every Sega console except for the Nomad and Master System, every Sony and Microsoft console, and some extras like the N-Gage, Ouya, and WonderSwan. We've never tried to collect for the sake of showing off. We collect because we want to enjoy the games. Maybe they bring back fond memories of our youth. Maybe we saw commercials and ads and never had the chance to enjoy them at the time. Maybe these games were hidden gems during the time when Crash, Sonic, and Mario and many other icons ruled the scene. The big thing is that you should get into collecting because you want to enjoy it rather than trying to show off. Think about it before you start because it just might not be the thing for you. I've seen some people who used to be collectors and are now trying to get rid of their collection because it's just not for them. Now that we've discussed the why you should get into collecting, let's get into the tips. So one of the biggest questions I get from people is how I can afford so many games. Well, this is kind of a two-part answer. The first part is that I budget myself. Whether or not you're getting into collecting, if you feel financial strain, I'd highly recommend learning about spreadsheets and making a budget for yourself. I personally measure each pay I get. I know my usual expenses that I have and my usual wants, like coffee, lots, and lots of coffee. If you know how much you'll need to use on your necessities, you'll know whatever's left over you can put towards your collection. If you don't spend that money during the pay period, you should throw it into a savings account or a safe in order to put towards bigger ticket items you know you want to get later. The second part of how I can afford my games is, as I said, luck. All luck. I frequent pawn shops and thrift stores in my area as well as retail game stores. Any place that could potentially sell games and their inventory is ever changing. Thrift stores are a good place to run in for a quick peek because you could potentially find a Japanese Game Boy Advance with backlit screen for $10. Yes, that's yet another one of my finds. It's all about being in the right place at the right time. There is a third way you can afford collecting, but...
Hey, you're not going to talk about reselling, are you?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Oh. Carry on.
As I was trying to say, the third thing you could do to help trying to afford your collecting is reselling. This is kind of frowned upon in the collecting community. Reselling is the act of buying a game for the sole sake of selling it again. Usually this is after finding it for a really good deal, then selling it for full or slightly more than full price. It's frowned upon because many collectors believe that you should be leaving these deals for other collectors who want that item. Personally, I think about how much I paid for it compared to the going rate. I don't like reselling for full price just because I'm usually selling to friends, shops I like, or other collectors. Personally, I only resell games I already own or games that I don't want at all. I have sold PS2 games that I've bought the HD remasters for on PS3, like the God of War games. There are certain situations where I wouldn't do this, like the Legend of Zelda games. It all depends on what you favor for your series. I like the God of War games, but I don't feel overly compelled to keep them. However, I feel as though I enjoy the Legend of Zelda series enough to keep the older versions, even when I have the newer HD remasters. I also do not sell the physical version of an old game that I own an HD version of digitally. I have Dark Cloud 1 and 2 on PS4, but I would never think about selling the PS2 versions because I only own them digitally on the PS4. In all honesty, I like the Dark Cloud series enough that I doubt I'd even sell them anyways. Now, the last few tips are based on how to focus your collecting. If you collect whatever game you see, you'll run out of funds pretty quickly. Even if you budget yourself, like I explained before, you'd end up not having the money for the stuff that you want most. So it's better to know exactly what you want to collect. You don't have to be extremely strict on the rules you set for yourself, but you need to understand when it's a good idea to stray away from your focus. There are certain things that I will actively seek, and I'll explain my reasons as well. I collect everything Koei Tecmo, including imports and games for consoles that I don't even own. This is because I've grown to be a big follower of the company. They foster their community and give back to their fans in ways that most companies wouldn't even bother with. Because of the way I've been treated by this company and the quality of the games they put out, I want to fully support them as much as I can. This is the top focus of my collecting. Next is my Vita. I love this console and take it everywhere I go. To work, for my breaks, on the road when I'm not the one driving, even when I go to visit my family, though it doesn't really get much use during that time. When it was released, I really wanted one. I even bought Dynasty Warriors Next a year before I bought the console. On top of that, the support from companies like Koei Tecmo, allowing cross-play and cross-saves with the PS4 version, makes it even better. Plus, companies like Limited Run Games, who put out the hardest to find titles, make collecting for this console a lot of fun. Lastly, I have a few random things that I keep an eye out for, but I don't go too far out of my way to seek. These are things like the Dreamcast. I always wanted one as a kid. My next door neighbor had one at the time, and I was wowed by the graphics compared to my lowly PlayStation. I remember wanting one so bad that when the Dreamcast collection came out for the 360, I bought it as soon as I could. I also keep an eye out for N-Gage games. This was another console that I was interested in when it was released. The 3D graphics look so cool compared to the Game Boy Advance that was its main competitor at the time. I don't come across many, but I will search on eBay here and there to see if there are any deals. I did happen to grab a bunch of these review copies as a lot. I can't remember how much I paid for them, but it was definitely worth it to beef up my N-Gage collection. You'd be surprised at how great this handheld is for FPS games. If I see any games for the Saturn, I'm always interested in getting some of the exclusives for it. That being said, most of the really good games are quite expensive. That reason alone keeps me away from actively trying to collect for it seriously. I have a hard time justifying some of these prices. I'm glad I've been able to find a few of these for really good deals, like getting Panzer Dragoon for less than $30. It may be the disc alone and not much of a discount as it's going for around $40, but it is a surprisingly difficult game to find in the wild. Another was Shining the Holy Ark. I didn't really get it for a steal of a deal, but I was able to trade in some games towards it. I also keep an eye out for games from other series and companies, like Hyperdimension Neptunia. Since getting the first game digitally on the Vita for $3, I've loved this series and its fourth wall breaking humor. I'll also try to pick up any WayForward games that I find. The Shantae games are awesome, and I'm currently playing Half Genie Hero both on my Vita and my PS4. I even own the physical copies on PS4 along with the soundtracks from Limited Run Games thanks to my fiance. And lastly, I'll pick up cheaply priced Skylanders, Disney Infinity, and LEGO Dimension figures because those games are actually a lot of fun. By keeping yourself focused on certain things, you'll find that you spend less money on the things you don't really need at that moment. There are games that I didn't really need to buy, but I did at the time because I was thinking I wanted to amass the biggest collection for the sake of having any game at my fingertips. Well, I was young and naive. I thought that it would be an easy task if I keep my mind on looking for cheap games, but each cheap game adds up. I had so many sports games that I didn't even want. I just bought them to beef up the collection. I ended up selling them because they were taking up space on my shelves that good games could fill. The only sports games I've kept are the non-sports ones, and anything that I've mentioned previously, like Koei Tecmo, Dreamcast, N-Gage, and Vita games. I still have those sports titles. The other thing is to have a healthy obsession for finding the deals. Once you start getting them, you'll want more, especially if you find a lot of good deals for stuff that you actually want. I was finding a lot of good deals at my local flea market, so almost every Sunday I'd go and pay $2 to get in, hoping that I'd find another deal. It got to the point where there was this big dry spell. Nothing but resellers and people thinking they had gold because either it was a noticeable name or just because it was an old video game. Then I'd find something like Final Fantasy 8, 9, and Tactics for $5 a piece, and it'd keep me going. If you think about how many times I went to that flea market, wasted my time, and paid $2 on top of that, how much money and time did I actually waste on nothing? It's good to know when to run into the flea market, when you should stop by the thrift store. I also used to always run into the thrift store when I drove by it. It didn't matter what I was doing, whether I was in the middle of running errands or out shopping for someone else. I had to go in. I knew that it wasn't likely that I'd find anything, but the odd time that I'd get a deal, I would continue to go in and waste my time. There was one time I was getting myself something small. It was a cheap item anyways, but the guy in front of me was holding a Sega Nomad with a $5 price tag, asking if he could return it if it didn't work. They didn't have any batteries to test it, so he wanted to make sure. Sadly, they told him it was final sale. The entire time I'd hope he would set it down and I'd be able to steal it from under him. But alas, fortune was not on my side and he bought it along with an NHL game. That experience made me want to keep going back until I found my own Nomad. But you have to understand when to collect. When to waste your time looking. It can be fun to go on a game hunting trip with your friends, but keep in mind that you have a life outside of gaming. Know that you should spend some time with your family. Spend some time with loved ones. Know when you should or shouldn't be taking the time out of your life to chase your hobbies and enjoy the little things. Like beating the shit out of someone in Mario Kart.